To another Innovation in Safety. I'm joined by Iain Summers, Vice President of Industrial Footwear, Industrial Workwear and Innovation at Marks. Morning, Iain.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for the intro. This morning, we're going to be talking to Geoff Fernie, who is a professor at UHN, a scientist at KITE, formerly TRI, and what I would call Canada's most reputable and expert on preventing slips, trips and falls, and injury prevention. Morning, Geoff.
Good morning, Iain.
I hope I included as much in your title as was necessary. I spent a bit of time last night checking all of your credentials, but I thought rather than trying to roll through them, I would maybe let you introduce to us and to the crowd just what it is that you do and how you spend your time trying to prevent injury.
Yeah, actually, for the last 20 years, my focus switched very strongly to preventing injury and illness when it occurred to me that it was just a lot more effective than trying to treat people afterwards. So there are really three areas that I focus in. One we're talking about today is slips, trips, and falls, which is the scourge of growing old. Falling over and breaking your hip is as good as, I mean, you finished your mobility after a certain age. And although you can get some very nice x-rays in orthopedics these days for fixing things, actually very few people get fixed. If I'm giving a lecture to an audience, and I ask people to raise their hands if they've got a relative who's fallen over and broken a hip, depending on the age of the audience, of course, but at least a quarter and sometimes a half of the audience will raise their hands and say, hey, yeah, I have. And then I ask them to keep their hands up if that person ever returned to normal mobility, normal life. Maybe one, maybe two in the room stay up. So it's a real tragedy. And it's not just broken hips, although that's the big one. It's fractured wrists. It's actually concussions, people falling over on pavements and hitting the back of their head as the head comes down on the pavement. So it's a big deal. And I first got interested in this particular problem of footwear when it's one of those days when something just struck me. Someone gave me a pair of winter boots that were very expensive, and they were advertised as being produced by a company where the president went to the Arctic and would go walking across the Arctic or something. And it was very lavish advertising. And we got the boots. They didn't fit me. We put them in, one of my graduate students into them. And we had an ice patch that we had made that was just at an angle, it was just 2 degrees. You could hardly, you could hardly sense the angle. And she stepped onto this ice to walk along this little track, and she couldn't move. She was just trying to walk up this smooth ice, and she was literally turning and sliding down sideways. And she was in fits of laughter. And in fact, the whole team that was watching was in fits of laughter. It was completely useless, a complete waste of money. And, I was thinking, my God, let's just look at this business of winter, because it's not the only place where people slip and trip, but it's a big cause of it. We see about 30,000 of these slips come into the emergency units in Toronto in a given winter. And
how many was that, Geoff? Sorry,
about 30,000.
30,000.
Yeah, I'm not good at statistics. Don't ask me a lot of questions. Yeah. In general, it's a big problem, and we all know someone who slipped up, and we've slipped up. God knows I have often enough. And so it occurred to me that the issue is there's no friction between the boots and the ground. And And when you think of it, you would never dream of going out in your car in the winter with bald tires, or at least I assume you wouldn't, unless you were from out west. But anyway, you just wouldn't, right? So but these boots were hopeless. So what we did was I had the good fortune to kind of like win a lot of money. It was not quite like that. You write grants in science and you cross your fingers and hope. And rather extraordinarily, I got a lot of money to build a big laboratory to try to deal with these kind of accidents, not just falls, but there were a lot of car accidents and other kinds of accidents. And what we had to do was we had to, in order to study and get to a real answer, we needed to create environments where accidents would happen and yet not injure the people. Because if I injure volunteers, it doesn't look good. Mm-hmm. And if I injure students, I get a bad rap for it. Yeah. So for winter, I didn't build it, although I did actually. I built quite a bit of it, but we built a big ice box. It's the size of a pretty good room. It's about 20 feet by 20 feet by about 12 feet tall. So think of it as a big ice box, and it's actually painted on the outside with a scene of the Arctic, inside. We made an ice floor, and we made it by putting glycol coolant. You know, it's the coolant you use in radiators and stuff, and it's circulated around, and water flooded over it so that the coolant keeps it frozen, and we can keep the temperature of the ice exactly right. And that'll be real important in a minute, because winter is actually pretty difficult to measure, because the behavior of boots and footwear in general on winter surfaces depends very much on temperature. It's a totally different scene if you've got really hard, cold ice, or if you've got slightly wet, mushy ice. It's totally different. And unless you own a big store that sells winter boots, you can't really have a rack of boots for different winter conditions. And also, you can't really go out in the morning wearing one pair of boots, and then when you notice a patch of sun on the ground, change them quick to the different ones. So we'll get back to that. So we can vary the temperature of the ice, and we can also vary the temperature of the air. Now, how do we measure? Because measurement's always the first thing. If you want to improve something, you got to be able to measure it in order to see how to improve it. So I thought, well, why don't we make it so that we can tip this ice box? So we make it so we can gradually tip it, and we have people walk up and down, and when they reach an angle where they can no longer do it, that's we call that's the critical angle. That's the maximum achievable angle. We call it MAA. And that represents how good the friction is to the ground. It doesn't mean that we're trying to make everyone into mountain climbers. That's not it at all. It so happens that the angle that you can go up and down safely is representative of how safe you are in walking even on level ground. So the steeper the ice, the better it works.
And so you have to be able to, Geoff, you have to be able to achieve ascent and descent to get to that maximum.
Yeah, actually, because as you go around, actually, it's surprising. There are lots of little slopes. There's little slopes at the end of the footpath down to the road. There's little slopes as you walk past someone's driveway where the curve is going off. So even if you live in flat ground, there's little slopes or ramps and things all over the place. But also, you can slip backwards where your feet shoot out in front of you, Or forwards, you can slip and your feet go back and you fall on your hands, which is actually a better way to fall. The nasty way to fall is to be going along and go foot back fast onto your head. So here we have a situation where you need to be able to walk up and down, and you need to be able to do that on hard, cold ice and wet ice. So what we do is we have a bunch of people do walking up and down and on hard and cold ice, and then we take the minimum value. Because we don't want a customer, we don't want a person, one of your customers or anyone out in the community to have to be sort of thinking about, as I say, what boots to wear on what day and where they're going. So we take the minimum. Now, this presents a problem for manufacturers like you. We're not the manufacturers, but we're trying to provide a service to help industry get better boots. So they'll send along boots for us to test. And sometimes they'll be disappointed because they get a low score. They actually got a high score, perhaps, on wet ice, but they got a low score on dry, cold ice, right? So what's happening at the moment is there's two technologies that seem to be working well. One is kind of like rough sandpaper, is grit in the bottom of the shoe. And that stuff is fairly good when you get cold, hard ice because it can stretch it, it can get into it. But when it gets onto wet ice, it just scratches through it, waves through it. The other is pretty neat stuff. It's fibers, usually fiberglass, sort of packed upright in a material, a rubber-like material, and it feels smooth. It looks smooth. But if you look at it under a microscope, you've got all these little fibers sticking up like mini micro crampons. That seems to work really well. Well, I say really well. We haven't ever got anything that works really well, but it works well on wet ice. So what manufacturers are doing now is they're trying to mix the two so that they get a reasonable score with us on the hard, dry stuff and a reasonable score with us on the wet stuff. And actually this year, some of the scores on the wet stuff have been pretty good, but they've been not doing so well on the hard. And actually, just to let you into a secret, one of the things that we're looking at now is, can we predict before we ever get samples? Can we predict how they'll perform? And we're doing some artificial intelligence to develop that so that companies like yours don't have to go to the expense of producing something and then sending it to us. We can make a pretty good guess ahead of time. That's where we're at. Originally, when I started putting this out, thought, well, people are not going to remember the number of degrees. It won't mean anything. And people are used to stars. And so like Amazon, you can get 5 stars if things are great. So we created a 5-star system, which went up to 22 degrees. And we did that because we actually had an experimental boot where I walked up and down 22 degrees. So we created a 5-star system. And then the first year we tested winter boots, I think it was 90% of them failed to get 1 star. It was terrible. And we thought we're going to be laughed at by the industry and by newspapers and stuff. So we chopped it off at 3 stars and said 3 stars is the best. I've still secretly got room to add those other 2 stars when the technology really improves. But we cut it off at 3. We're now at the stage after 4 or 5 years, there's been a steady improvement. The technology has been improved. The boots are getting better, or at least the boots that we're getting to test are getting better. Other people who are producing lousy ones simply may not be sending them to us. But the boots that are we're getting are gradually getting better. And we've now got some that are getting 2 stars. And quite a lot that are getting 2 stars in either in wet particularly rather than dry, cold conditions. But at least we're getting some that are getting 2. And I hope we'll drag up to get to 3. It's really important because we did a little study with home care workers. These are people who go and visit people at home who have a problem, and they do wound dressings or exercise or check their heart condition or whatever. And typically those people are not great at clearing their driveways and their footpaths and things. So the healthcare workers were getting injured a lot. And they're also, frankly, underpaid. They don't have a lot of money to buy good stuff. So we gave them some footwear, which got at least 1 star on our, or we call them snowflakes, actually, 1 snowflake on our system. And half of them got that, and half of them just wore their regular shoes, and we gave them, I forget how much money, $100 or something, or maybe a bit more, as compensation at the end. So they were treated fairly. And the people who wore even just the 1 snowflake boots fell 4 times less. Amazing. I mean, not 4% less, 400% less.
Yeah.
So it made absolute sense. They haven't done it yet, but for the industry to go out and buy all of their workers fresh, good winter boots, because they would actually save money by buying them fresh winter boots. Yeah, that's
it's a very fine balance in understanding, as you say, if you were preventative and you had people wearing good footwear, just how much you would save in your business, and also lost time and injury, but just better health and safety conditions for workers. It's really surprising how little it actually gets enforced, and I think that's why we came to you and started working with you and understanding how boots perform on wet and dry ice, because there's, like you mentioned, there's no other environment that changes as much as ice. When you're on the south side of the building, the ice will probably be wet and soft. When you're on the north side of the building, it will be hard and dry. When you're on the west side, it could be windy and have snow covering it, and you may not ever get a chance to actually step on the ice because you're on the snow, and the snow does not stick to the ice. But on the east side of the building, the snow could have stuck to the ice because the morning sun melted it and it froze. And how do you deal with all of those conditions?
Well, there's another condition, Ian, and that is that you step into the lobby and you step onto the terrazzo floor. And I mean, if it weren't for that, for example, you would put little studs or spikes. So if you live in the country, like when I'm up at my cottage, I wear boots that I think you gave them to us for testing or something, but they have a thing in the heel that you turn and spikes pop out. And then you turn it and they come back. It's really nifty. And it works at the cottage because I go outside the cottage and everywhere is snow and ice, and that's fine. And I just have to remember when I step into the cottage not to nail myself to the floor or onto the concrete of the garage and go skidding across it, right? So, but unfortunately it can't work. And you know, the other thing that people haven't all grasped, although people are beginning to, people think that by looking at winter footwear for the winter, you can see whether it's good or not. You look for deep tread, and you look for aggressive coloring and titles, you know, Arctic Smasher or something, something really dramatic with big, thick soles and big grips, and it doesn't necessarily work at all. In fact, relatively no tread sometimes with the right materials works better, because the deep treads might just clog up, and then you've got snow and ice on snow and ice. What's the good of that, right?
Yeah, it's a very fine balance getting the tread design, the compound, and then the durability. And just like our tires, right? If you wear boots designed for the winter and for ice, if you wear them in warm conditions or on dry pavement, they will wear out quite fast, just like your winter tires would.
Yeah, actually, what? That's my biggest worry at the moment. Some of the boots that work quite well, they don't last very long. And winter footwear people think of as a significant expense. And I think that, generally I recommend they get a new pair every winter, but that's pretty hefty on people's wallets. And I really worry about that. And I haven't been able to get a handle on where with winter footwear, because it's so expensive to test. Yes, you can get a robot. It's quite expensive, and it'll walk one pair of boots. But yeah, we've got lots of boots to test. And so I've got very fit graduate students, because I've had them walking around the same track every lunchtime, although they're not allowed to be around at the moment. So that's been a problem in COVID times. But we started that, where they walked around the same track over and over again. And we got some gas meter readers to wear boots and to look at them. We really got to, between us somehow, between your industry, which is fabulous in its support, but between progressive industries, between the companies that really care, and ourselves probably, we've got to try to solve that problem of how to measure durability and how to recommend that to people.
It's our biggest challenge as we go into production. I think you were being very modest about your ice box, just to give people a little better understanding of it. I would describe your ice box as something that perhaps NASA might own, based on it can turn on any axis at up to 20 plus degree angle. The ability to be able to freeze water in the box, also change the air temperature from what can you go down to, like -20?
No, -10.
-10.
When we go below there, we don't really learn much more. There's no point. And we get all sorts of humidity and condensation problems. Interestingly, manufacturers still rate winter footwear by the temperature that they can go down to. And you see manufacturers advertising -100 centigrade. I hope that no one ever of your clients is ever faced with -100 centigrade. I don't know how they get it that. We don't have that on Earth. They have to go into space to get those temperatures. But yeah, it is sophisticated. We even can create snow. But I haven't yet found a good way of testing winter footwear on snow. If you've got fresh snow, you can buy the cheapest running shoes, except for your feet getting cold. They'll work on fresh snow because they dig into the fresh snow. But once you walked over it a couple of times, it's changed. It becomes hard. And then when it starts to melt, you've got thick, slushy stuff sliding over other stuff, and the shoe never even gets anywhere near the surface underneath. So we have been testing with snow, but we haven't really worked out a way of providing reproducible, meaningful results. We've done it for snow tires on wheelchairs and things, but we always have to carefully grade it, and we measure the pressure and density of the snow and stuff. That is a problem. But I'm much more worried about real icy and wet patches. And now I'm hoping, well, with your help with building an indoor version so that we can get it, all these people who slip up on wet floors, wet patches, or greasy floors, or oil patches at any time of the year, because that's another big issue.
Yeah, can you let's talk about that for a few minutes. I'm glad you brought that up. That's the one of the biggest problems that we have in the industry, in the service hospitality um, industry indoors, is that there is no standard that's practiced. People say you must wear some sort of slip-resistant footwear, but trying to, for the consumer to try and determine, or even the employer, what is approved, what is a good value, what product works in the industry, is very, very hard for people to figure out. And so tell us a little bit more about how we might be able to address that and bring some safer product to this industry.
Yeah, the hospitality industry is a big industry because I work in a hospital, and also I want to tell you, yeah, the kitchens are a problem in the hospital, but also slips are the biggest occupational disease cost in our hospital. This is, I mean, there's always wet patches on the floor in a hospital. People spill things, people dribble, whatever, and all the occupational health videos that you have to take in these compulsory courses every year show that your reaction should be to run and get a yellow cone and mark out the area and call someone to mop it up and stuff. Well, how silly. If only you could wear shoes that didn't slip,
Yes.
life would be a lot better. So we've got to do something about that. So we're going to do the same as we do in winter, except it will be at room temperature, and we're going to put different flooring down because the flooring matters, and then we will put standard, like scientists tend to do, standard amounts of contaminants. So we'll put a standard amount of water on to see if it's what happens with water. And I guess in the hospitality industry, we will take one medium-sized egg and smash it and put it on, or whatever, one pork pie spread across the ramp, whatever the standard is going to be. And then we will see what we can do. And as I say, measurement is the first part of it, and we will try and help the industry develop better footwear and test it for them and see what we can do together. Yeah, and then we'll try and promote it. I've already talked with the CEO of my hospital. We have 20,000 employees. So if I said to him, look, if we can decide on appropriate footwear, at least for the caregivers, couldn't we come to an arrangement where even if you can't buy it for them, because there must be some rule that hospitals are not allowed to buy footwear for their employees or something, but couldn't we make an arrangement with our friends in the industry, and if they show their hospital ID, they could get a discount, and we can work something out like that. There's a lot of enthusiasm for it. If we can come up with the right solution, there is enthusiasm for encouraging workers in various ways to adopt the right footwear. And I'm sure that's true right across the hospitality industry, because the cost of injury is just a very big factor in your business.
Well, with what you've done with Rate My Treads, which is how you go in and find out which boots. If you go onto your website, Rate My Treads, you can see which boots perform in the winter. I hope you get to a place where you're able to start testing for the service, hospitality, hospital, medical industry, and be able to identify it. I don't know whether you use it instead of a snowflake, it's a chef's hat, or it's whatever it is.
Yeah.
That you do, so that we can get a rating out there. Then we have a benchmark to then work towards in the industry. Because we've had to set our own benchmark as far as coefficient of friction on all the different materials, both dry and wet, and different substrates of flooring, and then different liquids on there as well. And so the sooner we can get that into the industries, the better. And I don't know, we're always trying to track and understand just how many injuries there are, how many slips, trips, and falls, and or lost man hours. Talk to some companies, and they have a horrendous amount of lost man hours in 1 year, and it's all based on improper footwear and the conditions that people work in.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Absolutely. And once we get the slips solved, we have to solve the trips, and we're doing some quite interesting work there as well. And the trips, though, is we can deal with them a little bit with the footwear, and we have to deal with them also with the smoothness of the surface people are walking on. But we will have intelligent footwear eventually. It'll be a while, but there are already some little electronic circuits. They're a bit gimmicky that go into footwear, but we've developed stuff that warns you if when you're walking, it warns you if you start to get tired, which I sometimes would do, and you're sort of almost scraping across the floor, that you're about to trip up. You better pick your foot up more.
Yeah. There's a company called out of France, Zortec, and their technology and being able to understand and be able to send messages, store the actions that the wearer is going through, and then be able to download that down to the employers so that they can understand what their workers are going through and the conditions that they were in based on the measurements that they get back. And we're very close to taking that into pilot testing right now. Been working on that for years, and it's kind of the same, nothing really changes. If at first you don't succeed, try again. We're on our third processor going into the footwear, and I think we've probably changed and altered the app about 20 different times now to be able to understand that. The biggest thing is trying to understand what constitutes a slip and then into a fall. You skid, you slip, and then when at what point do you become it's the danger, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have micro slips all the time.
Yeah.
And when is that a dangerous slip? That's exactly right. With tripping, what we've been doing is measuring the minimum space, the minimum clearance with the ground. What's amazing when you walk is that, your leg is swinging through fast, and it clears the ground with a few millimeters. That's very clever, because you've got all the joints of the other leg supporting you, and that leg, and your brain is working this out, and you just clear the ground. But tripping, you only have to, drop 5 millimeters, a quarter of an inch, and you'll trip, and you won't be able to do anything about it. So we're now measuring to plus or minus a millimeter, and we use time of flight. One of the things that fascinates me is GPS. The fact that you can measure, which side of the road you're on with a cheap non-military GPS, which is measuring the time from a satellite that light travels down at the speed of light, radio waves travel down. It's incredible when you think about it. So we now use little time of flight sensors that they emit light, and they measure how much time it takes to go down, hit the pavement, and come back. And we get a precision within a millimeter. I mean, it's phenomenal what's happening now. And the question then is, how do you enclose it within footwear so that you're not got some chunky thing that you're going to trip over. And it's reliable and stuff. But I want it real time. I want it so that if I'm starting to get tired, as we know, as you get older, people eventually start to shuffle even. I want it to shout at me, to beep at me, or make my toe glow or something. Pick it up. We're getting into rougher ground. Or, hey, you just slipped. You just slipped a little bit. You might not have noticed. Just slow down. Let's just be a bit careful. Whatever. Yeah. We've got cars that drive themselves. I mean, we've got to have footwear that drives itself. We've got to have auto walking footwear. We've got to have more intelligence in our footwear, as well as better materials to protect people. Because the key to getting rid of slips and trips, obviously, is the footwear. Because that's what's between you and the ground, and that's what's stopping you slipping and what's causing you to trip. Yeah.
I remember years ago, probably close to 10 years ago now or more, we did a study with the University of Calgary in their kinesiology department with Professor Darren Stefanishen's team. And they had built a glass walkway, and we had cameras underneath the glass walkway. And then students again, but in harnesses. By the way, all of your students wear harnesses, correct?
Oh, yeah, I got. You remember this time I got in real trouble? There was some TV crew or something from a website came and filmed in Winter Lab, and of course, like TV crews love it because people go sliding and careering down. Yes, we have a harness so you can't come to any harm, and we even have mattresses at the downhill ends so that nothing happens. But this guy said, and who do you use for your experimental subjects? And I said, well, graduate students, because they're disposable. Well, it went wild. There were more than 1 million hits on the first day, and apparently got more hits than anything else. And there were these people who had no sense of humor, who wrote serious letters. Dr. Fernie, you need to see a psychiatrist. But fortunately, most people got it. They understood the humor, but some people take life very seriously.
When we were doing that study at the U of C, the amount of time and the amount of the area in which you strike. So you have like seconds, not even seconds. You have milliseconds from the time your heel strikes and your foot starts to go down, and before you're into a skid or a slip. And it's so critical to be able to understand that. And with their help, we had designed a heel that mushroomed on impact. So you improve your surface area by 100 or 1,000% because it's such a small area. And if you can get that material to function properly, you can really prevent a lot of slipping. The problem is, again, is wear and durability, because it's such a fine line in being able to achieve the desired results, but also everybody wants their product to last, and as you said, it's expensive to be replacing your footwear, but it's also extremely important to know when your footwear is worn out. And yes, the uppers may look good, but the bottom of the shoe may not be performing the way you want it to. The way it should be.
One dreams of, if you had your mushroom heel, maybe you could, when you buy your boot, it comes with 6 spare mushroom heels, and you clip a new one on after the mushroom heel starts to show red or something.
Right.
But it's, I mean, there's tons of possibilities, aren't there? I mean, the people used to think of footwear as being anything but scientific. It was something that cobblers did, and they did beautiful work. I mean, fantastic work. They would make you, I used to go to Florsheim in Chicago, and they had a special workshop there where they would make shoes for presidents and big football players and stuff, and they would someone would catch a crocodile and bring it in and say, make me a pair of shoes out of this, or a shark or whatever. Beautiful stuff, all with shiny leather soles on the bottom. Hopeless, right? So
not very practical as far as preventing slips.
no, but we're getting there. We're getting some science at last, and I don't know whether it's appropriate, but I have to compliment you, because you guys have really been leaders, and you've really been taking this seriously, and it's bringing footwear into a new age, and it's lovely to see.
Yeah, it's coming up on 20 years that we put a stake in the ground as a company to make it our mission to prevent slips, trips, and falls. Understanding how the product works in the environments that it's exposed to. I have to tell you, it's been challenging for sure, but it has been gratifying in knowing that the industry is progressing. And as you said, winter footwear is getting better. And it's getting better because of all the work that you're doing and your ability to be able to test and give us back that information to then go and then improve on the product. And when I think about where we were and all the things that we've tried and where we are today, there's been some great advancements, but it's a very slow process because, as you said, footwear is still considered something nice that you look at and you put on your feet because you need to, without really thinking about how is the bottom of that shoe functioning, and how is the shoe bending and twisting or torquing, or how is it not, in order to be able to provide better protection.
Yeah, that's right.
So Adam, I'm sure you must have some questions for Geoff.
Yeah, Geoff, I think, first of all, thanks for sharing all the information with us. When you think about all the work that you're doing around testing, what does success look like for you when you think about companies out there? And if you could fast forward 5 years into time, what would success look like for you?
Yeah, there's two things. Actually, the number of people who visit the website is really important, and not just who just flash to it, but who dwell on it and help choose their footwear from it. That means a lot to us, because that means we're influencing people to buy stuff that is better stuff. So I want to see those numbers increase steadily over time. And so every time I do a press interview or anything, I unashamedly promote Rate My Treads. And I do that because we don't make any money out of it. I do it because in order for us to achieve our goal is to stop people getting hurt. Yes. So the more people who know about these results, the better. So that's one of the success scores. And the other is the number of companies, or the amount of activity going on in developing new footwear that we've been able to help in some way. Sometimes just by testing, and I hope in the future by helping make some recommendations for materials and design and stuff. That counts as well. So those are the two things that matter to me.
Excellent, thanks. The other question I have is, we deal with many large corporations across Canada. If you could give these companies advice, what would it be around helping reduce slip, trips, and falls? Because I think you talked about the number of incidents. So if there was some advice you could give these companies, what would it be?
I would already tell them that if they live in an environment that has winter weather, it'll save them money. If if they buy all their employees new winter footwear every year. But I'm some way off persuading them. But the economic argument is solid, actually, and we'll get there. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
So the ramp that you're building to be able to test indoor and hospitality, medical, service industry. When do you think that that ramp will be ready, Geoff, so that testing can be done and people can submit samples to it and get back the result?
I keep hoping it's any time, but we're in Ontario at the moment. I mean, COVID has been quite a problem for more than a year. We try to keep the number of non-clinical people in our hospital down to about 10-15% of the usual amount because we're scared. Every time someone comes in, if they walk in with COVID and if our staff start to get it, we're in deep crisis. So, I mean, research is considered an essential service, but nevertheless, everyone's working. I have meetings with my teams and they're all working in their garages and stuff, and we're trying to make things happen. So that's the unknown for us at the moment. But as I understand it, everything is geared up and ready. And I know there's piles of parts that are already built. But I can't say. I personally think that the crisis with COVID will be over in July, but I could be wrong. And then hopefully we'll get things together fast after that.
Let's hope you're right, because it's a terrible thing we're dealing with right now. When we talk about footwear and how it wears, one of the things that we're focused on I was telling you about the technology that is owned by a company called Zortec. It's very important to be able to tell the employer what condition their employees' shoes are in.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think we're going to be able to achieve. And so if you pronate or supinate, we'll be able to be measuring that and understand the wear on the shoe and how it's functioning. But also, we're working on trying to figure out if we can measure comfort. So your shoe is delivering a certain amount of comfort when you buy it, or your boots, and at what point is that comfort gone, and now at what point are your joints acting differently because you're walking differently, your knees, your ankles, your foot, because I think that's of great importance as well. In if you walking properly will also help prevent slips, trips, and falls.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, all I can do is agree. Yeah. And comfort is important. I've got to do a program, that CBC program called Marketplace. I'm doing that this summer, and they're very interested not only in the slips and the trips, but they're also interested in the comfort, how warm and how dry are shoes. These things are actually quite difficult, to measure. For example, moisture in footwear is not just from water leaking in from outside, it's also you sweat.
And you sweat a lot too.
Yeah.
Your feet sweat a lot.
Yeah. So what does it mean? Yes, you can stick a boot in a bucket of water and measure whether any water leaks in, but that's really not the issue. And how you decide what's comfortable, other than having people tell you what they feel and whether it's comfortable.
Yeah.
And then you've got to, of course, when you have qualitative opinions like that, you've got to have lots of people, and you've got to put them in lots of different circumstances, wearing lots of different shoes. and that's very expensive. And of course, at the moment, it's extremely difficult to organize because we're not allowed to recruit people.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of advanced moisture management and testing at SATRA in the UK. So, you know, measuring the boot when it's dry, how much water it takes in when it's in water, and the difference in the weight, but also the importance of breathability inside of the shoe over time. And that is, I mean, but that all boils down to how well the product is made, but also the types of socks that you're wearing. There's so many different types, so many different conditions to get the, you know, the ultimate, if you will, in performance and comfort.
Yeah.
So this, Geoff, this has been a great conversation. Thanks very much for spending the time with us, and hopefully through your comments and this video that we can educate some people in the industry. And I know Adam is really looking forward to even further conversations and perhaps doing more of these and bringing the awareness to the industry.
You know, Iain, I actually enjoyed this discussion. I mean, you're supposed to say that, but I really did. I enjoyed this discussion. I always enjoy chatting to you guys, and I'm available anytime. Happy to do it.
Well, listen, Iain and Geoff, thank you to both of you. Really appreciate you taking the time. I think, Geoff, if you're interested, we'd love to have you on again as we continue to work to raise awareness around slip, trips, and falls in the industry, and hopefully reduce the number of incidents that take place. So to both of you, thank you very much for taking the time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Adam, thanks a lot. It was great. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks very much,
guys.
Geoff.